Before Rome conquered the known world, before Latin became the voice of the empire, there was another civilization thriving in the heart of Italy. They built vast necropolises, crafted golden jewelry with uncanny precision, and whispered to their gods in a language unlike any other on earth. These were the Etruscans, a people both familiar and utterly alien, whose words echo faintly through time, not in speech, but through carved inscriptions on stone, pottery, and bronze. Their culture once dominated the Italian peninsula, and yet today, their language survives only in fragments, a ghost script we have never fully decoded. The story of the Etruscans begins not in legend, but in the soil, buried beneath vineyards and olive groves, hidden in hillsides and tombs. In the 19th century, a wave of archaeological fervour swept across Europe, and Tuscany, Umbria, and Lazio, once Etruria, became treasure maps for scholars. What they found astonished them. Elaborate underground tombs, painted with vibrant scenes of banquets and dances, funerary urns shaped like reclining nobles, and thousands of inscriptions written in a script that looked vaguely Greek, but wasn't. Who were these people who lived alongside early Romans, yet vanished almost completely, leaving behind no clear successor? Unlike Egyptian or Sumerian, the Etruscan language isn't part of any major linguistic family. It is non-Indo-European, a lonely voice surrounded by tongues we can trace. The Etruscans had writing, yes, but they left us no Rosetta Stone, no bilingual tablets, no long religious or historical texts. Most inscriptions are short, names of the dead, dedications to gods, ritual formulae, enough to know it was a rich language, but not enough to understand it. The mystery deepens when we realize how deeply embedded Etruscan culture was in early Rome. Many Roman religious rituals, city planning techniques, and even symbols of power, the toga, the lictors' fasces, were borrowed from the Etruscans. The Romans knew this and even wrote about it, but often in mythologized terms. Livy, Varro, and other Roman writers referenced Etruscan customs with awe and reverence, yet their accounts are centuries removed and coloured by Rome's own identity. In many ways, the Etruscans were Rome's cultural ancestors, and its first victims of cultural erasure. But the Etruscans didn't just fade into history. They were absorbed, overwritten, edited out. Their cities like Veii, Tarquinia, and Clusium became Roman municipalities. Their language was replaced by Latin. Their rituals were absorbed into Roman religion, but their original meanings were lost. And as their spoken language vanished, so too did the key to unlocking their world. Without native speakers or surviving grammars, Etruscan became a puzzle of isolated words, repeated formulae, and unknown meanings. Today, we know the Etruscans called themselves Rasenna or Rasna. We can pronounce most of their words thanks to their phonetic alphabet adapted from Greek, but meaning eludes us. Even the word Etruscan is not theirs. It's an exonym from Roman Etruscae or Greek Tyrannoi. To understand them, we must read between the lines, through funerary art, religious artifacts, and the scattered remnants of a language that no longer breathes. But what if the Etruscans never truly vanished? What if their words, etched into cinerary urns and temple dedications, were never meant for us, but for something eternal? The tombs of Cerveteri and Tarquinia are not just burial sites, they are archives, communicating through murals and inscriptions, offering a glimpse into a culture whose voice refuses to die completely. In this series, we will explore the lost language of the Etruscans, not just as a linguistic puzzle, but as a window into a forgotten world. We will examine the archaeological evidence, the attempts at decipherment, and the eerie silence that surrounds a once flourishing culture. We'll visit the tombs, artifacts, and sacred spaces they left behind, and we'll listen closely for the messages buried in stone. The Etruscans left us clues. Now, it's time to follow them. The first step in unraveling any ancient language is understanding its script. With the Etruscans, we are both fortunate and cursed. Fortunately, we can read their letters. Cursed because we can't always understand what those letters mean. The Etruscan alphabet is deceptively familiar. At first glance, it resembles Greek. In fact, it is derived from the Western Greek alphabet used by Greek settlers in southern Italy known as the Euboean or Chalcidian script. But while we can phonetically sound out nearly every Etruscan word, the meaning of most still escapes us. What we do know is that the Etruscans adapted this Greek script sometime around the 8th century BCE. They tailored it to fit the sounds of their own language, dropping some letters, modifying others, and adding a few unique symbols. The earliest known Etruscan inscriptions date back to around 700 BCE, found on pottery shards and funerary goods. These are short, sometimes just a single name or phrase, but they already show a standardized system of writing from the very beginning, suggesting the language had been spoken and likely written long before. The Etruscan script is usually written from right to left, although some inscriptions use boustrophedon, a method where lines alternate direction, like an ox ploughing a field. Despite their artistry and engineering skill, the Etruscans were practical writers. They carved their messages on tomb walls, bronze mirrors, temple offerings, and burial urns. Their writing is found in stone and clay, metal and ivory, often meant for the dead, or the gods, or both. But the real mystery lies not in how they wrote, but in what they were trying to say. Linguists have identified roughly 13,000 Etruscan inscriptions, yet fewer than 1,000 words have known or suspected meanings. Most inscriptions are formulaic. X, son of Y, gave this offering, or this is the tomb of Z. It's enough to glimpse a framework of grammar, nouns, verbs, case endings, but not enough for full comprehension. It's as if we were trying to understand English using only tombstones and wedding rings. Even so, certain words have been translated with confidence. Avil means year. Shuthina refers to the underworld. Vel and La appear as common names or divine titles. Some Etruscan deities like Tinia, Uni, and Minerva, equivalents of Jupiter, Juno, were adopted by the Romans, offering clues through religious parallels. But context remains elusive. Without bilingual inscriptions, we can't be certain how these words were used in full sentences or how much nuance they carried. Attempts at decipherment have sparked both rigorous scholarship and wild speculation. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, some believed the Etruscans were descendants of Trojans, Pelasgians, or even Atlanteans. Others tried to link their language to Basque, Finnish, or even Japanese. None of these theories held up under scrutiny. Modern linguistics has placed Etruscan in a small family of ancient Mediterranean languages called Tersenian, which includes the Rhaetian language of the Alps and Lemnian inscriptions from the island of Lemnos. But even this connection, while intriguing, has yielded little in the way of concrete translations. Still, the alphabet itself is a marvel, an echo of cultural exchange in the ancient world. The Etruscans borrowed from the Greeks and in turn passed their alphabet to the early Romans. The Latin alphabet we use today is a direct descendant of the Etruscan script. Every time we write in capital letters, A, B, C, we trace the ghost of Etruscan hands, chiseling names and prayers into tombstones. Their language may be dead, but their letters live on, quietly shaping the modern world. What if those letters are more than just symbols? What if the act of writing, for the Etruscans, was itself a kind of magic, a way to communicate with the divine or preserve identity beyond death? Many inscriptions appear on votive offerings or in tombs, suggesting the written word had sacred power. They weren't writing for future generations, they were writing for the gods, the dead, and perhaps even for the soul's journey in the afterlife. In our next scene, we'll explore the places where these words still reside, the painted tombs and necropolises that serve as libraries of silence. These burial sites aren't just resting places, they are pages in a forgotten book where art, ritual, and fragmented language converge in haunting beauty. The Etruscans may have left us few complete texts, but their tombs speak volumes. Deep beneath the soil of central Italy, entire necropolises, cities of the dead, preserve stories told in paint, stone, and ritual. Nowhere is the silent voice of the Etruscan people more hauntingly preserved than in these subterranean chambers. And while we may not fully understand their language, their visual storytelling bridges the gap, revealing a culture at once foreign and familiar. In places like Tarquinia, Cerveteri, and Orvieto, tombs were carved into rock or constructed with stone blocks, often laid out in planned grids resembling city streets. Inside these homes for the dead, walls burst with colour, frescoes that depict dancers, banquets, musicians, mythical beasts and underworld scenes. These images aren't mere decoration, they're part of a funerary language, conveying beliefs about the soul's journey and the identity of the deceased. These painted tombs are, quite literally, illustrated manuscripts of the afterlife. Take the Tomb of the Leopards in Tarquinia. Its frescoes show a lively banquet scene. Reclining men and women share wine, music and laughter beneath a pavilion of trees and bright birds. The leopards above may symbolize guardianship, protecting the passage from life to death. Another tomb, the Tomb of the Augurs, features a mysterious figure making a gesture known as the Fair Sioux, wearing a mask, and engaged in a ritual or game involving blood and danger. These aren't random images, they are scenes filled with symbolism, perhaps once familiar to every Etruscan viewer. Some tombs contain painted inscriptions, giving us tantalizing fragments of personal identity. We see names, titles or blessings, Vel Caicnus or Lathia Scianti, names of real individuals who once walked the sunlit streets above. Yet even these snippets are often formulaic, and without extensive context they remain fragments. Like looking at a torn photo album with the captions faded, we're left with more emotion than comprehension. Archaeologists treat these tombs as multi-layered texts. Every object, urns, mirrors, weapons, jewellery, adds a word or a sentence to the overall message. The layout of the tomb itself tells a story. Some resemble houses with doorways and beds, suggesting the dead continue to live in their tombs. Offerings left behind, bowls, combs, cosmetics, hint at personal rituals or symbolic gestures meant to accompany the soul into the afterlife. When taken together, the images, inscriptions, and architecture form a kind of grammar, a way of structuring belief through spatial and symbolic design. But again, the Etruscan language thwarts full translation. Unlike Egyptian tombs, which contain detailed hieroglyphic spells from the Book of the Dead, Etruscan tombs rarely contain long written texts. Most writing is sparse, and even when present, we often don't fully understand its content. The vivid imagery fills the gap, becoming the primary text through which we interpret the Etruscan soul. We are left decoding an entire worldview with only partial keys. Still, there are signs of a deeper narrative. Many tombs feature the same symbolic elements: doors painted onto walls, figures gesturing toward dark portals, and deities like Charon, the blue-skinned death demon with a hammer, or Vanth, a winged goddess who guides the dead. These recurring motifs suggest a shared cosmology, a belief system about what happens after death. Perhaps the Etruscans didn't see death as an end, but as a transformation, an entry into a mirrored world beyond. One particularly eerie sight is the Tomb of the Blue Demons. Here, figures are shown being led by Vanth into the underworld, while monstrous beings await them. One scene depicts a deceased man seated at a feast, his arm raised in a silent toast. Is he welcoming the living or acknowledging his fate? The images evoke emotion, grief, acceptance, celebration, but without the language to anchor them, we interpret through feeling rather than fact. In the absence of books or scrolls, these tombs act as the Etruscans' narrative legacy. They left behind not a library of texts, but a theatre of memory, carved in stone and painted with the palette of mystery. Each tomb is a chapter, each fresco a sentence, each artifact a lingering whisper. In our next scene, we'll step beyond the tombs and into the living Etruscan world, cities, temples and marketplaces, where language once echoed in public life. What evidence remains of how they spoke, wrote and prayed in daily existence? And could the living hold clues to the lost voice of the dead? Beyond the silence of tombs, the Etruscans once spoke, chanted, bartered, prayed, and ruled through a living language that has now mostly dissolved into echoes. But what did their daily speech sound like in bustling markets, sacred temples, or in quiet moments at home? Though the Etruscan language is considered extinct, evidence of its use in everyday life survives, etched on pottery, carved into stone, and sealed in the grooves of metal mirrors. Each fragment offers a fleeting whisper of their spoken world. Unlike Latin, which evolved into the Romance languages, or Greek, which has a clear lineage and extensive corpus, Etruscan was isolated, unrelated to Indo-European tongues, and left with no linguistic descendants. This makes reconstruction incredibly difficult, yet it's clear that the Etruscans used writing in ordinary and official contexts. Thousands of short inscriptions, many no longer than a name or a phrase, have been found on artifacts. Bowls, jewelry, votive offerings, even dice. These aren't formal literature, but they are the street signs of a society. They show that writing wasn't just for the elite or the dead, it was embedded in life. Imagine walking through an Etruscan city like Veii or Clusium. Market vendors call out wares, priests chant rites at a temple, and magistrates read edicts to the public. Somewhere, a mother carves a name into a child's toy, or a potter inscribes a message before firing a ceramic jug. These everyday moments are where the Etruscan language lived and breathed. The problem is, we've found only shadows of these scenes. One of the longest surviving Etruscan texts comes from the Liber Linteus, a linen book that was cut into strips and used to wrap a mummy in Egypt. This bizarre fate preserved over 1,000 words, ritual calendars and liturgical instructions. But even here, with the structure of a real text in hand, the meaning remains mostly opaque. We recognize numbers, dates, and some verbs, but the full translation is still elusive. Another key source is funerary inscriptions. Stone sarcophagi or urns frequently bear brief texts, names, familial relations, possibly professions or prayers. From these, we've built a lexicon of around 200 known Etruscan words. But without full grammar and syntax, translating longer sentences is like trying to understand a song by hearing just one note at a time. Still, some vocabulary has been decoded. For example, the word avils means years, often followed by a number to indicate age at death. Larth and Arnth are male and female names. Clan means son of, while The might mean here or this. When seen together on a tomb inscription, these create basic structures. Larthvelis clan, Arnth avils 45. Larthvelis, son of Arnth, aged 45. It's skeletal, but it's a start. The Etruscans were also administrators and city builders, and they used their language for governance. Bronze tablets like the Tabula Cortinensis preserve contracts or legal agreements, often in incredibly technical language. This tablet, discovered near Cortona in 1992, contains over 200 words, likely describing a land sale or inheritance case. It's clear that Etruscan had the capacity for formal discourse and legal complexity. Another artifact, the Capua tablet, may contain a religious or calendrical text. Again, more signs that Etruscan was used across diverse spheres of life. Some scholars believe that Etruscan society had scribes or priests dedicated specifically to interpreting omens and codifying religious law. This would suggest that their language was not only used in everyday life, but refined into an elite tool for diplomacy, ritual, and power. But how did it sound? That's the hardest mystery. Etruscan was written in a variant of the Greek alphabet, which helps us approximate pronunciation. Scholars believe the language had a strong, staccato rhythm, with many closed syllables and harsh consonants. It was likely quite distinct from the fluidity of Latin or the melodic tone of Greek. If spoken aloud today, Etruscan would probably sound as foreign to modern Italians as Finnish or Basque. There's also tantalizing evidence that the Romans themselves were once bilingual. In early Rome, many patrician families had Etruscan ancestry and retained Etruscan priests, particularly the haruspices, ritual diviners who read omens in animal entrails. Some Roman authors, like Varro and Livy, mention Etruscan words and customs as foundational to early Roman identity. Yet even by the 1st century BCE, the language was vanishing, remembered only by specialists and mystics. In the end, the spoken word has faded. No one alive can speak fluent Etruscan. There are no audio recordings, no dictionaries from native speakers, no Rosetta Stone to bridge the gap. But each inscription, each fragment, each scratched word is a breadcrumb on the trail. And when we read these fragments, we participate in a shared act of linguistic resurrection, trying to make the dead speak once more. In most ancient cultures, mirrors were objects of vanity or simple utility, but for the Etruscans, they were portals, surfaces of bronze that shimmered with stories, gods, and strange scripts. These engraved mirrors, often placed in tombs, served not only to reflect the living, but also to speak to the dead. On their polished backs, mythological scenes unfold, some familiar, some utterly unique, and inscribed alongside them are names and phrases in the Etruscan language. These mirrors may be among the richest narrative sources we have from this enigmatic civilization. Over 300 Etruscan bronze mirrors have been found, mostly in women's tombs. Each was hand-engraved with an image, often depicting scenes from mythology, everyday life, or spiritual rituals. But unlike Greek or Roman myths, the characters here are sometimes unrecognizable. A hero embracing a winged demon, a goddess holding a writing stylus, a three-headed figure walking through a gate. These aren't your familiar Hercules or Zeus stories. And yet, many figures are labelled with names, offering crucial clues. For instance, one mirror shows a woman standing between two men. The names inscribed are Akle, Eka, and Munthush. We recognize Akle as Achilles and Munthush as Memnon, suggesting this is a version of the Greek story where Achilles kills Memnon. But the Etruscans twist the tale. Eka, possibly a local spirit, stands between them, mediating. It shows how the Etruscans absorbed Mediterranean myths but retold them in ways that suited their worldview. What's remarkable is that these inscriptions, though brief, are some of the most legible Etruscan texts. They label characters, describe actions, or offer blessings. Words like terse, he gives, zilath, magistrate, or alpan, offering, show up repeatedly, allowing scholars to decode context through repetition and positioning. These mirrors then are illustrated texts, language and image fused in bronze. But the mirrors are more than narrative tools. They are spiritual objects. Many scholars believe they were used in divination. Just as Roman haruspices read entrails, Etruscan seers may have used the reflection of bronze surfaces to glimpse the future or communicate with the dead. Some mirrors depict scenes of the afterlife or figures holding keys to the underworld. One famous mirror from Bolsena shows a woman named Vanth, winged and solemn, guiding souls beyond. Her name is repeated on tomb walls and urns. She's not found in Greek myth. Vanth is wholly Etruscan. There's also the figure of Charon, a blue-skinned, hammer-wielding demon often accompanying Vanth. On mirrors, he doesn't ferry souls like the Greek Charon. He guards doorways, stands watch, or metes out divine punishment. His presence on everyday objects like mirrors suggests that Etruscans didn't compartmentalize life and death. Both realms overlapped constantly, and even a lady's mirror might carry a warning or a promise from the other side. Some mirrors even depict writing tools themselves. In one, a figure holds a wax tablet and stylus, suggesting literacy was a valued trait. Another shows a woman, perhaps a priestess or noble, writing on parchment. These scenes challenge the old assumption that Etruscan literacy was confined to a male priestly elite. It hints at a broader, more inclusive literary culture, especially among Etruscan women who played prominent social and spiritual roles. Visually, the artistic style on these mirrors is elegant and flowing. Figures are drawn in fine, incised lines, graceful and expressive. Unlike Roman realism, Etruscan art favors stylized emotion, gestures, gazes, and symbolic postures. When paired with even a few decipherable words, the effect is striking. The viewer doesn't just see the story, they are invited into a ritualized experience, part myth, part memorial. The locations where these mirrors are found also add context. Many were placed in tombs beside grooming kits, combs, perfumes, jewelry, items for the afterlife. But their mythological engravings suggest they were not mere accessories. They were spiritual passports, objects that might remind the soul of its lineage, its gods, or its destiny. And in a culture where names had sacred power, the presence of labeled deities and spirits may have served a protective role. Some scholars even theorize that mirrors were used in storytelling rituals. A seer or priestess might hold the mirror aloft and recite the myth depicted, weaving the tale with blessings or divinations. In this way, the mirror becomes a book, a stage, and a relic all in one. It captures what we lack from the Etruscans: a literature, a canon of stories. These fragments on bronze may be the closest we'll ever come. Ultimately, the Etruscan mirrors are like compact worlds, miniature narratives etched in metal and wrapped in mystery. They show us that this lost civilization was not only literate, but imaginative, spiritual, and deeply symbolic. In Etruria, the dead did not sleep in simple graves. They lived on in homes carved from rock, elaborate replicas of the living world built underground. These tombs, many still preserved across Italy, are among the greatest architectural and artistic legacies of the Etruscans. They are not just burial chambers, they are silent cities of the dead, places where the living once communed with ancestors, where language, ritual, and belief blended in a powerful expression of identity. And here, etched into stone walls and painted across plaster, the ghost language of the Etruscans lingers like an echo that refuses to fade. The Etruscans believed in an afterlife, but unlike the somber Hades of the Greeks, their concept of the next world was vivid and physical. Tombs were built to resemble domestic interiors, with carved stone beds, doorways, ceiling beams, and even household items, stone renditions of everything a soul might need. The walls were adorned with bright frescoes, banquets, dances, chariot races, and family gatherings. These weren't mere decorations, they were affirmations of life continuing beyond death. One of the most famous necropolises is Cerveteri, once part of the powerful Etruscan city of Caere. Its Banditaccia necropolis stretches for miles and contains hundreds of tombs, ranging from simple chamber burials to massive mounded structures with multiple rooms. Walking through it feels like entering a ghost village, circular stone houses with doors, steps, and chambers open to the sky. The Tomb of the Reliefs, for example, is carved entirely in stone but displays the tools of everyday life: helmets, shields, knives, even a dog on a leash, all sculpted in bas-relief on the walls. It's as if the dead simply moved house. Inside many of these tombs, inscriptions decorate sarcophagi, urns, and lintels. These short texts are often all we have to identify the deceased. They follow a pattern: the name of the dead, their parentage, age, and occasionally their role in society. Lath Tetnes, son of Vel Avils 47. Simple phrases, but they anchor these lost individuals in time. The words are formulaic, but their repetition across sites has helped scholars reconstruct bits of the language, how the Etruscans marked time, named families, and recorded memory. At Tarquinia, another major Etruscan city, the Monterozzi necropolis holds over 6,000 tombs, many with vibrant wall paintings. The Tomb of the Leopards, painted around 480 BCE, shows a banquet of reclining men and women, unusual in the male-dominated Greek world. Music, food, and laughter are everywhere. Overhead, painted inscriptions label the figures. These aren't gods, they are family members, depicted enjoying eternity. It's a scene of joy, not judgment. Another tomb, the Tomb of Orcus, reveals darker themes. Monsters and underworld figures loom large, including a grotesque demon named Tukulchar. Here, inscriptions mix names with cryptic words, some likely prayers or titles. The language becomes more than a label. It becomes a spell, a marker, a shield. It suggests the Etruscans saw writing as a sacred act, capable of shaping reality even after death. These tombs also reveal societal structure. The repetition of certain names, titles like Zilath, magistrate, or Marunuch, possibly priest, and the inclusion of both male and female figures hint at a complex, possibly matrilineal culture. Women were clearly honoured in death, their names carved beside their husbands, their lineage recorded equally. Unlike Roman or Greek tombs, Etruscan ones reflect an unusually egalitarian view of the afterlife. Despite centuries of tomb robbing, natural erosion, and war, new discoveries still emerge. In 2013, archaeologists uncovered a sealed tomb near Tarquinia containing 2 sarcophagi with intact inscriptions. The names matched those on known family tombs, confirming genealogies long suspected by historians. It's no coincidence that the largest body of Etruscan writing comes from funerary contexts. The Etruscans saw the afterlife not as an end, but a transformation. a second existence that required continuity of name, memory, and ritual. Language played a key role in that transition. To name the dead was to preserve them. To carve a word was to create permanence. And so, while their spoken tongue is gone, their funerary inscriptions remain, silent guardians against the erasure of time. But even more intriguing is how these tombs may have been used during life. Evidence suggests that families returned to ancestral tombs to hold rituals, perhaps even meals. Bones of animals and vessels for wine have been found in entranceways. The tomb was not sealed and forgotten. It was a place of return, a site where the language of the living mingled with that of the dead. And in that overlap, the Etruscans built something rare, a civilization where death was not a separation but a conversation. The Etruscans left behind more than tombs, statues, and artifacts. They left behind a voice locked in symbols we can pronounce but barely understand. It lingers on shards of pottery, inscribed on mirror backs, carved above the entrances to the dead's eternal homes, a language frozen in time. For centuries, scholars, mystics, and cryptographers have tried to resurrect it. Some say the task is impossible, a code without its key. Others argue we are on the verge of a breakthrough. In this final chapter, we explore the efforts, ancient and modern, to breathe life back into a language that has been mute for over 2,000 years. The first known attempt to understand Etruscan came from the Romans themselves. Even as they absorbed Etruria into the growing republic, Roman scholars like Varro and the Emperor Claudius studied Etruscan texts, which still existed in their libraries. Claudius wrote a 20-volume history of the Etruscans, drawing on now lost native sources and marrying them with Roman interpretations. Tragically, his works vanished in the chaos of the empire's decline. With them went much of the Etruscans' own recorded memory. In the centuries that followed, Etruscan writing became a curiosity. Renaissance antiquarians puzzled over inscriptions, guessing wildly at meanings. Some saw Hebrew in the letters, others Egyptian. In the 19th century, archaeology gave the effort a firmer foundation. Tombs, sarcophagi, and everyday objects yielded thousands of inscriptions. The language was clearly not Indo-European, though it borrowed words from Greek and Latin. It had a structure, grammar, and vocabulary of its own, but no Rosetta Stone ever appeared. Without long bilingual texts, translation stalled. Still, the work continued. Scholars compiled dictionaries of attested Etruscan words, numbers, names, verbs like terse, he gave, and tuth, people. They studied the grammar, subject-object-verb order, use of suffixes to show possession and case. They mapped family relations through recurring names in tombs, and they discovered connections to a possible language family called Tyrsenian, shared with the Lemnian language found on an island in the Aegean, and possibly Rhaetian in the Alps. These were not full translations, but frameworks, linguistic scaffolding. One major breakthrough came with the Liber Linteus, a 1,300-word ritual calendar written on linen, later used to wrap a mummy in Egypt. Though it's not bilingual, the text includes recurring patterns, date references, and religious terminology. Along with bronze tablets like the Sippus of Perugia and the Tabula Cortinensis, it gives us rare extended samples of Etruscan prose. Still, the meanings are mostly speculative. We can say, this might be a priestly role, or this could be a land deed, but we cannot yet read them as fluently as we can Greek or Latin. Enter the modern era. With advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning, linguists are revisiting Etruscan with new tools. Algorithms trained on known Etruscan inscriptions, cross-referenced with Latin and Greek parallels, are beginning to detect deeper structures, syntactic patterns, word frequencies, and grammatical rules invisible to the human eye. One project by MIT applied neural networks to the language, and while it didn't translate Etruscan, it helped isolate probable verb and noun groupings. Think of it as a kind of linguistic weather radar, mapping storm systems of meaning, even if we don't yet know what they say. Other researchers use 3D imaging and a multispectral scanning to reveal faded or erased inscriptions on ancient surfaces. Texts once thought lost are being resurrected, one pigment layer at a time. Entire phrases are coming back into view after centuries of silence. Each new word adds to a fragile but growing lexicon. Some even propose speculative reconstructions. Using known Etruscan grammar and vocabulary, scholars have written modern sentences in Etruscan, tentative phrases meant to reflect how the language might have sounded in prayer, in greeting, in lament. It's not a translation, it's a resurrection theatre. But it brings the language one step closer to life. Yet there's a haunting irony to all this. The Etruscans were deeply literate, teachers of the Romans, masters of ritual, recorders of the skies and laws, and yet we stand outside their words, peering in through a frosted window. We know what their letters sounded like, we can recite them. But meaning, the heartbeat of language, remains elusive. It's as if we have the lyrics but no melody, or a map but no key. Still, the effort continues, not because we expect full translation in our lifetimes, but because the act itself is a kind of respect. A recognition that the dead still have stories worth hearing, that their voices mattered, that their language, ghostly as it is, remains one of the final frontiers of the ancient world. The Etruscans once thrived in the heart of Italy, commanding cities, crafting gold and whispering prayers in a language now lost to time. Their words echoed through temples carved into stone and painted on tomb walls, messages meant to endure. Yet today their language lies like a broken code scattered across fragments, stubbornly silent. Despite decades of scholarly effort, we still cannot fully read what the Etruscans once said, what they believed, or even what they called themselves. Their voice is gone, and with it much of their identity. And perhaps that is the greatest tragedy of all. The fall of a civilization isn't always marked by war or fire. Sometimes it dies quietly, when its words can no longer be heard, when no one remembers how to speak its truths. In a world obsessed with preserving monuments and artifacts, we often forget that language is the soul of a people. Without it, we can only guess at their fears, their humour, their hopes and their love. But maybe, just maybe, some messages still remain. In the patterns of grammar we can half understand, in the rituals that echo through Tuscan festivals, in the DNA of the people who still walk the hills their ancestors once ruled. The ghost language of the Etruscans might not be completely dead. It may just be sleeping, waiting for someone to listen with new ears. As we close this chapter, one question lingers. What else have we lost? Not because we destroyed it, but because we stopped understanding it. The past is full of voices like the Etruscans, muted, forgotten, yet never truly gone. We just have to find a way to hear them again. In the winter of 2015, divers scanning the seabed off the southern coast of Sicily near the ancient city of Gela stumbled upon something extraordinary. From the murky depths, 300 meters offshore, they retrieved dozens of metal ingots scattered across a wreck site, pieces of an ancient cargo lost to time. At first, the discovery seemed routine. Another shipwreck, another pile of bronze or copper. But laboratory tests soon revealed an unsettling truth. This was neither bronze or copper. The composition was unusual, high in zinc, copper, lead, iron, and traces of nickel. It didn't quite match any known alloy from the ancient world. Local media lit up with headlines, "Atlantis metal found off Sicily." The ingots bore striking resemblance to descriptions of a mythical material known as orichalcum, the fabled red gold metal of Atlantis, mentioned by Plato in Critias. In the dialogue, Atlantis's temples, walls, and even the royal palace gleamed with orichalcum, a rare substance, second only to gold in value. Plato never said where it came from, only that it was mined from the bowels of the Atlantean island itself. For centuries, scholars dismissed orichalcum as allegorical, perhaps symbolic of lost grandeur. But now, in Sicilian waters, something eerily similar had surfaced. Had we found the real orichalcum? The implications were explosive. If the metal was real, and if it came from Atlantis, then Atlantis itself might not be fiction. It might have been a seafaring power, trading its precious alloy across the Mediterranean. And if Sicily was receiving shipments, could it have been a colony, a rival, or even a remnant of the lost civilization? But beneath the excitement lay murky waters. Critics pointed out that orichalcum's descriptions had long been debated. Some believed it referred to a type of brass, a zinc-copper alloy unknown until at least the 7th century BCE. Others argued it was a misinterpretation, perhaps a poetic invention. The Gala ingots only deepened the confusion. Their metallurgical profile didn't match typical ancient brass, nor did they match electrum or standard bronze. The material was unique, but not in a way that provided clear answers, only more questions. The shipwreck itself was dated to around the 6th century BCE, during a time when Greek colonies flourished along Sicily's coasts. Gela, founded by settlers from Rhodes and Crete, was a powerful city-state engaged in active maritime trade. Could these ingots have come from Greece, from Africa, or somewhere more mysterious, somewhere beyond the edge of recorded history? Local archaeologists were cautious. The find was historic, yes, but tying it to Atlantis required a leap across mythological chasms. Still, conspiracy theorists and independent researchers jumped at the opportunity. Online forums exploded with theories, some drawing lines between Plato's dialogues, ancient maps, and seismic activity in the Mediterranean basin. Others claimed the ingots were evidence of a suppressed history, one in which ancient civilizations were far more technologically advanced than we've been taught. But even beyond the Atlantis angle, the ingots raised fascinating questions. How was this alloy made? Why was it valuable? Where was it produced? And who lost it at sea, never to reclaim it? Perhaps most disturbing of all was the location itself. Gela sits near Mount Etna, one of Europe's most active volcanoes. The nearby waters are riddled with seismic activity, and in some submerged regions, thermal vents bubble up from the seafloor. Some believe these geologic forces may have played a role in ancient cataclysms, possibly even the sinking of a landmass, if not Atlantis, then something like it. This was no mere salvage operation. The wreck off Gela may have cracked open a portal to one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Had we discovered a missing puzzle piece, or just another artifact waiting to be misunderstood? In the silence of the deep, the metal ingots gleamed with a dull, ancient shimmer. Orichalcum or not, they carried whispers from a forgotten world, a world where myths walk the earth and maybe, just maybe, still do. More than 2,300 years ago, the philosopher Plato wrote 2 dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, that would ignite one of the most enduring mysteries in Western history. In these texts, he recounts the tale of a vast and powerful civilization, Atlantis, which ruled the seas over 9,000 years before his own time. This island empire, Plato says, was larger than Libya and Asia combined, filled with abundant resources, majestic temples, and a technological sophistication that rivaled the gods. But buried within the tale, amid the politics and earthquakes, lies one of its most puzzling elements, the mysterious metal known as orichalcum. In Critias, Plato describes orichalcum as a lustrous, precious metal, only slightly less valuable than gold, used to adorn the interior walls of Atlantis' grand temple of Poseidon. The entire building gleamed red with the metal. Columns, floors, even the ceiling was sheathed in this enigmatic alloy. To Plato, orichalcum was not just decorative, it was symbolic of Atlantis' wealth, its divine favor, and perhaps its eventual fall. But what was orichalcum really? Was it a real material known to ancient metallurgists, or a literary device, an invention crafted to dazzle Plato's audience and emphasize Atlantis' grandeur? Ancient sources struggled to agree. Some claimed orichalcum was a naturally occurring alloy. Others said it was artificial, forged through secret metallurgical processes. In later centuries, Roman texts referred to orichalcum as a type of brass made by mixing copper and zinc. The Roman scholar Pliny the Elder noted that by his time, the formula had been lost and orichalcum was no longer in production. Even then, its mystique had already begun to grow. Fast forward to modern times and the debate only intensifies. Many scholars argue that Plato invented Atlantis as an allegory, using orichalcum as a symbol of hubris and excess. But others suggest he was drawing on fragments of much older stories, handed down through Egyptian priests, who supposedly recounted the tale to Solon, a Greek lawmaker who traveled to Sais in Egypt. According to these accounts, Atlantis perished in a single day and night of catastrophe, swallowed by the sea. But could Plato have encoded a real, half-remembered history in his tale? And was orichalcum a real material that once played a role in a lost civilization? This is where the discovery off the coast of Gela reopens the question. The metal ingots found there don't match any known Greek or Roman industrial metals of the time. Their unique composition suggests a manufacturing process, either lost or never fully understood by known ancient civilizations. Some propose the alloy was the result of advanced smelting, perhaps even recycling techniques. Others speculate that it came from an unknown culture entirely. The implications are profound. If Plato didn't invent orichalcum, and if its description corresponds to real materials, then perhaps other parts of the Atlantis account are grounded in truth. Could orichalcum be a fossilized clue pointing to a forgotten technological tradition? If so, then our understanding of history is incomplete, perhaps even manipulated. And there's something else. Plato places Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Heracles, or what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. But some researchers challenge this interpretation, arguing that Plato used metaphorical language. In this reading, Atlantis could have been located within the Mediterranean itself. If so, then Sicily, a major crossroads of ancient cultures, becomes a tantalizing candidate for Atlantean contact, trade, or even migration. These are not idle speculations. Modern geologists have noted signs of massive underwater landslides and sudden collapses in the Mediterranean basin. Could these geophysical events have inspired Plato's tale of a sunken island empire? And more to the point, was orichalcum the key to Atlantis' power, or was it the reason for its downfall? In myth and history alike, metals have always been more than commodities. They are the bones of civilizations, iron-forged empires, gold-financed wars, bronze-armed gods and kings alike. If orichalcum was real, and if it played a role in ancient geopolitics, then perhaps Atlantis wasn't a utopia. It was a superpower, one whose secrets were buried with the tides. In 2015, a team of marine archaeologists exploring the shallow waters off the southern coast of Sicily made a startling discovery. Lying just 1,000 feet from the shore of the ancient city of Gela, buried beneath layers of sand and silt, was the wreck of a 2,600-year-old ship. What caught the and Gersemi's attention wasn't the hull or the amphorae scattered across the seafloor. It was a cluster of gleaming metallic ingots. Unlike anything previously recovered in the Mediterranean, these bars had a reddish-gold hue and were unmistakably artificial in composition. When tests came back from the laboratories, the results caused a sensation. The ingots were composed of a unique alloy, primarily copper and zinc, but also including traces of nickel, lead, and iron. This was not pure brass nor typical bronze. Metallurgists dubbed it an exotic high-zinc brass that did not match the manufacturing techniques known in the 6th century BCE. Some hailed it as a missing link in the evolution of metalworking. Others had a more provocative idea. Had we just found orichalcum? The implications were explosive. The site, ancient Gela, was a major Greek colony founded around 688 BCE. It was a trading hub, strategically located between East and West, North Africa and the European mainland. The ship, estimated to have sunk around 600 BCE, was likely headed to a local foundry. But the metal it carried did not resemble the typical commercial cargo of the time. Instead, it matched Plato's description, a shiny metal only second in value to gold. But here's where things get stranger. The alloy's formulation suggests it was not made through the cementation process, which mixes copper with zinc ore in a crucible, a method believed to have only emerged centuries later in Roman times. Instead, the uniformity of the ingots suggests a controlled smelting process, possibly involving distillation or vapor phase transfer of zinc, techniques thought to be well beyond the capabilities of early Mediterranean metallurgy. So where did it come from? Was this technology developed independently by an unknown culture? Did the Greeks inherit it from a forgotten civilization? Or is it possible that this metal, this orichalcum, was a remnant of an even older industrial tradition now buried under centuries of sand? To those who believe Atlantis was a real place, or at least based on cultural memory, this was a smoking gun. The shipwreck at Gela suddenly placed a material long thought mythical into a real-world archaeological context. It bridged a gap between legend and artifact. It gave substance to Plato's poetic vision. But skeptics were quick to counter. They argued that the ingots, while rare, were not unprecedented. Some suggested they were early experiments in brass production. Others claimed the term orichalcum had shifted meaning over the centuries and didn't necessarily link to Atlantis. Still, the oddity of the composition and the fact that it appeared out of nowhere in the 6th century BCE refused to be dismissed. Local Sicilian archaeologists began re-examining other unexplained artifacts from the region. Some theorized that Gela, or perhaps nearby Syracuse, could have been a remnant colony of a once great seafaring culture that predated the Greeks. The connection between Orichalcum and Sicily began to solidify, and the possibility emerged that Sicily itself, positioned in the middle of the ancient Mediterranean crossroads, may have once served as a sanctuary for the last heirs of a lost civilization. Further underwater exploration revealed no additional ships, but sediment samples taken from the seabed showed traces of slag suggesting the area had once seen industrial activity on the coast. Could there have been a coastal metalworking facility here, destroyed by time, erosion, or tsunami? Even more intriguing was the fact that orichalcum ingots have not been discovered elsewhere in such quantities. This uniqueness adds to the sense of mystery. If orichalcum was common, it should have shown up across the ancient world. Its isolation to this single wreck off Sicily suggests something deliberate, perhaps even secret. Could it be that this cargo was not meant for trade, but for protection? Was it being smuggled, rescued, or hidden? The ship's direction and condition imply it was headed toward Gela, not away from it. Was it bringing knowledge from somewhere else, perhaps from a vanishing people clinging to the last sparks of their technological inheritance? The Gela shipwreck remains one of the most confounding maritime finds in modern archaeology, not because it tells a complete story, but because it whispers fragments of one. A story that begins with a metal lost to myth, resurfaces in Plato's vision of Atlantis, and now washes ashore in Sicily in the form of shimmering ingots, each one asking the same question: what was forgotten and who tried to preserve it? To understand the true enigma of orichalcum, we must journey deeper, beyond myth, beyond archaeology, into the shadowy world of ancient metallurgy. A world where craft bordered on magic, where fire was both tool and god, and where the creation of metal was considered a sacred act. In this world, orichalcum was more than a material, it was a legend born in flames. In ancient times, metals were not classified by periodic tables or scientific formulae. They were spirits, they had temperaments, alchemical correspondences, celestial rulers. Gold was the metal of the sun, silver of the moon, mercury, iron, tin. They all held their place in a cosmological order. But orichalcum was something else entirely. The name itself is a riddle, from the Greek ore chalkos, meaning mountain copper, or perhaps mountain metal. Yet it was not mere copper. It was something refined, mysterious, its recipe kept secret or possibly lost forever. Some believe orichalcum was an advanced brass made through the cementation process, heating copper with zinc ore and charcoal in a crucible, causing zinc vapor to diffuse into the copper. But here's the twist. Zinc melts at around 420 degrees Celsius, yet it vaporizes at about 907 degrees Celsius. Ancient metallurgists had no way of measuring temperature precisely, yet somehow they managed to produce complex alloys that still puzzle modern scientists. How? One possibility lies in observation and oral tradition. Ancient craftsmen may have passed down exact knowledge of when to add certain materials, based purely on color changes in the fire, texture of the slag, or even the smell of the smoke. Their smelting sites weren't factories, they were temples of transformation. And orichalcum, whether real or symbolic, became a marker of this lost mastery. In Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley, we find records of elaborate metalwork as early as 3000 BCE. In some cases, metals with strange lusters, red gold, blue silver, suggest that early metallurgists were not merely experimenting, but achieving results we can't yet replicate. In Anatolia, artifacts found in royal tombs show alloys with curious ratios of tin, copper, and arsenic, materials that would require precise control of heat and atmosphere. Some claim these are signs of a forgotten science, one that blended intuitive craftsmanship with a cosmology of metals now erased. Could the makers of orichalcum have been heirs to this deeper knowledge? The question becomes more pressing when we consider the geographical context. The Mediterranean, particularly around Sicily, was a melting pot of metallurgical traditions. Phoenician traders, Etruscan engineers, Greek blacksmiths, and North African artisans all converged here. If a lost formula survived, Sicily would be the perfect crucible for it to re-emerge. But there is also a more esoteric angle. In Hermetic writings, texts associated with Egyptian Greek alchemy, there are cryptic references to red metals of the deep and hidden alloys that gleam with the blood of Mars. Some see these as symbolic metaphors. Others, especially fringe historians, interpret them as literal, secret recipes coded in allegory meant to protect sacred knowledge from the uninitiated. One such recipe describes the blending of the sun and the dragon, believed by some to refer to gold and zinc. If true, then orichalcum was not simply a product of chemistry. It was a ritual object, possibly tied to religious or state power. It may have only been produced during rare astronomical alignments or in sanctified foundries. Could this explain why orichalcum is so rare in the archaeological record? Was its production limited by more than just technological constraints, perhaps by taboo, ceremony, or secrecy? The ingots found off Gela may not be mass-produced industrial products. They could have been votive offerings, royal tributes, or sacred currency. Some theorists suggest they were part of a temple hoard, spirited away during a crisis. Or even worse, evidence of forbidden knowledge being smuggled across the sea before an empire fell. In this light, the Gela find isn't just rare, it's dangerous. A keyhole glimpse into an ancient metallurgical tradition that someone, at some point, wanted erased. Perhaps orichalcum was lost not because it was forgotten, but because it was suppressed. As with all things hidden in history, absence invites speculation. But this much is clear. The craftsmanship behind the Gela ingots implies a level of precision, planning, and symbolic knowledge that far exceeds simple utilitarian use. Orichalcum may not be a fantasy metal from a sunken city. It may be the smoking relic of a forgotten science, a science that once fused fire, ritual, and mathematics into metal that glowed like blood in the light of a dying sun. It's time to revisit the myth that started it all, Plato's Atlantis. Written around 360 BCE in the dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Plato describes an advanced civilization beyond the Pillars of Heracles, modern-day Strait of Gibraltar, that grew arrogant and was punished by the gods. But within this allegory lies a tantalizing detail that's rarely taken at face value. The city of Atlantis shimmered with orichalcum. According to Plato, the Atlanteans used orichalcum to cover the walls of their inner temple and to line the walls of their city's concentric rings. He described it as only a name now known by legend, suggesting that by his time, orichalcum was already mysterious and possibly extinct. And yet, Plato's writings give us a surprisingly detailed inventory of Atlantis' architecture, down to its temples, bridges, and even drainage systems. Why such specificity for a place that allegedly never existed? The Temple of Poseidon at the center of Atlantis was said to be a marvel. Its walls gleamed with orichalcum, reflecting light in ways that made the entire structure glow like fire under the sun. Its columns were encased in silver, its roof plated with ivory, and the floor, also of orichalcum, shimmered red gold. If these descriptions are to be believed, then orichalcum wasn't just decorative, it symbolized power, divinity, and unearthly perfection. This level of detail has led some researchers to argue that Plato's account wasn't purely fictional. Perhaps he was drawing on older sources, oral traditions, or stories passed down from Egyptian priests, as he claimed. In Critias, he says the story came from Solon, the great Athenian lawmaker, who heard it from Egyptian priests in Sais. They told him that Atlantis existed 9,000 years before his time, an impossible date, or a mistranslation of lunar years. In this context, the Gila ingots take on a new layer of significance. If the Atlantean legend was based on memories of real ancient civilizations, perhaps Minoans or an even earlier forgotten culture, then the use of orichalcum in Sicily suggests a continuity, a transmission of metallurgical knowledge from a once great seafaring society, scattered by catastrophe and carried westward by survivors or imitators. Some even suggest that Atlantis was never beyond the Pillars of Heracles at all, but within them, that Plato misinterpreted his sources, or that the phrase beyond the pillars referred symbolically to distant knowledge rather than literal geography. Could Atlantis have been in the Mediterranean all along? If so, could parts of Sicily, strategically located and culturally rich, be fragments of that world? Let's consider the logistics. Plato described the Atlantean capital as consisting of concentric rings of land and sea, a canal system, and a vast plain surrounded by mountains. Sicily's landscape offers several candidates: sunken landforms off the coast, underwater anomalies, and even inland plains surrounded by volcanic ridges. But perhaps the strongest argument lies not in the geography, but the metallurgy. Orichalcum is the thread connecting Sicily to Atlantis, a substance Plato himself deemed second only to gold in value, yet now found in a sunken ship off Gela. Could these ingots be remnants of a culture inspired by the memory of Atlantis, or even a descendant civilization? The argument is speculative, but not absurd. The ancient world recycled myths through the lens of memory and trauma. Cataclysms such as the Thera eruption or the Bronze Age collapse sent shockwaves across continents. Entire cities vanished, peoples migrated, technologies were lost, then rediscovered. In that chaos, a people who once worked orichalcum could have fled their homelands, carrying their knowledge to new shores, including Sicily. Some fringe theorists go further. They suggest the ingots recovered near Gela may have been destined for ritual use, that someone in the 6th century BCE attempted to recreate a ceremonial rite described in Atlantean myth, a consecration of sacred metal. Perhaps these were not trade goods, but offerings to a memory long extinct. A final tribute to a forgotten golden age. What's clear is that orichalcum, whether fact or fiction, was not just a metal, it was a cultural relic, a symbol of a lost utopia. And if Atlantis was real, even in the symbolic sense, then finding orichalcum in a real-world context like Sicily reopens questions the academic world has tried to keep closed. The boundaries between myth and history blur most dramatically in metals. Gold, iron, bronze, they shaped empires and defined ages. Orichalcum, though, belongs to the shadows, half metal, half myth. Yet now we can hold it in our hands, pull it from the sea and ask, who cast these bars? For whom and why? To understand the mystery of orichalcum, we must widen our lens beyond Sicily, westward to the edge of the ancient world, to regions once thriving with metalworking cultures, now largely forgotten. Two locations in particular demand attention: Sardinia and Tartessos, both deeply tied to ancient metallurgy, both rumoured in old texts to possess vast riches, and both tantalising candidates for Atlantean ancestry. Let's begin with Sardinia. Scattered across this Mediterranean island are thousands of megalithic towers called nuraghes, stone fortresses whose purpose remains ambiguous. Built by the Nuragic civilization between 1800 and 500 BCE, these structures suggest a society with not just engineering prowess, but a complex social hierarchy. More importantly, Sardinia was rich in copper, silver, and lead, and archaeological digs have uncovered extensive bronze artifacts, tools, weapons, and ritual items. Could this have been an orichalcum-producing culture? Some researchers argue that the Nuragic people knew how to smelt complex alloys. The island's proximity to Sicily and its long history of seafaring trade make it a plausible intermediary, perhaps even a contributor to the spread of orichalcum craftsmanship. It's even been suggested that Sardinia may have inspired parts of Plato's Atlantis account, with its stone towers echoing the circular architecture described in the myth. But Sardinia is not the only forgotten powerhouse of ancient metallurgy. Travel further west to the southern coast of Spain, and you reach the shadowy realm of Tartessus. This semi-legendary kingdom was once known to the Greeks and Phoenicians as a source of immense wealth. Herodotus referred to Tartessus as a prosperous land beyond the Pillars of Heracles, and it was famous for its gold, silver, and especially tin, a vital ingredient in bronze production. Here, the parallels with Atlantis grow sharper. Tartessus was said to lie on a river, perhaps the Guadalquivir, and boasted enormous metal resources. Some classical sources describe it as a port city with advanced architecture and unknown origins. Like Atlantis, it vanished mysteriously. Though archaeological efforts have uncovered artifacts linked to Tartessian culture, inscriptions, jewelry, and religious icons, the city itself remains elusive. In 2010, satellite imagery revealed submerged geometric formations near the Doñana National Park in southern Spain. Some researchers speculate these could be remnants of Tartessus, or even Atlantis itself. Critics dismiss such claims, citing natural processes and confirmation bias. But the interest in Tartessus as a metallurgical hub remains strong. If Tartessus was real, and if it exported tin, bronze, or even early forms of orichalcum, then it becomes a key puzzle piece. The ancient Phoenicians, master traders and metallurgists, linked all these regions together. From Tyre to Gadir, modern-day Cadiz, they moved metals, myths and technologies across the Mediterranean. The ship that sank off Gela may well have been part of this network. It's entirely possible that those orichalcum ingots originated not in Sicily, but in a workshop in Tartessus or Sardinia, shipped to Gela for ceremonial or commercial use. This leads to an uncomfortable possibility, that orichalcum was never the secret of one lost civilization, but the shared legacy of many interconnected ones. A melting pot of techniques, legends and ambitions passed from one people to another, until the whole system collapsed. After the Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE, many of these societies vanished. Trade routes died, knowledge was forgotten, the lights went out on orichalcum. And yet, it never entirely disappeared. The discovery of the Gela ingots reignited a trail that had long gone cold. Coupled with bronze tools from Sardinia, hordes of Tartessian jewelry, and cryptic mentions in Greek and Roman sources, we're left with an idea. Orichalcum was real, and its legacy is scattered in fragments across the ancient world. Perhaps we've been too focused on Atlantis as a single place. Maybe the real Atlantis was a network, a Bronze Age internet of technology, trade, and symbolic metals. In that case, the question becomes not where Atlantis was, but when. Maybe Atlantis was not a city swallowed by the sea in one night, but a golden age drowned by time, its last echoes found in a Sicilian shipwreck, Sardinian towers, and Spanish legends of cities built from fire-coloured metal. As the echoes of ancient shipwrecks fade and the shimmer of orichalcum disappears once more beneath layers of sand and secrecy, we're left with a haunting realization. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, but remembered. Across millennia, this one alloy, whether a simple brass blend or something far more complex, has tethered myth to reality, fact to folklore, and history to conspiracy. Orichalcum may not be the key to Atlantis, but it remains its most compelling whisper. In a world driven by data, we often dismiss what we can't quantify. But ancient societies encoded truths not in spreadsheets, but in stone, story, and symbol. The orichalcum ingots of Gela might just be a relic of metallurgy, or they might be fragments of a forgotten intelligence that once spanned coasts and continents, now reduced to myth by time and control. Ask yourself, why do some discoveries vanish from headlines so quickly? Why do certain artifacts remain under lock and key, unexamined, unexplained, and unseen? And why does the idea of Atlantis still stir something primal in our collective imagination? Some deep-rooted memory of a golden age that ended not with fire or flood, but with forgetting. We may never find Atlantis on a map, but its fingerprints are everywhere, in metals that defy classification, in ruins that predate their histories, in symbols carved by hands we no longer understand. Perhaps the true legacy of orichalcum isn't its shine, but its silence. A silence that grows louder the more we try to ignore it. This has been the Orichalcum Conspiracy. If the past is hiding messages in metal, then maybe it's time we start listening.